I'm Gary Parrish. Welcome back to CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to the like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, it would be awesome if you did that while you're here. Let's get into it today. Surprise, surprise. We are launching an off-season series that can more or less be described as the top 25 college basketball stories of the past 25 years. Number one is obviously Devin Downey getting 30 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and spoiler alert, and 2 steals in a 68-62 victory over top-ranked Kentucky. That was back on January 26, 2010. That's number one. That goes without saying. But what else is on the list? That's what we're going to spend 5 episodes total telling you. We're going to count it down from 25 to 1. So today we're doing number 25, number 24, number 23, number 22, and number 21. And just so there's no confusion, just so you know where to direct your hate.
Right here, baby.
This is Matt Norlander's list. I have nothing to do with the list.
That's correct.
I was not consulted.
No, you were not.
I was not asked for my thoughts in any way whatsoever. I am really just here to get some words from our partners every once in a while.
No, it's much more than that. And in fact, in all honesty, as we get ready to do this first episode, obviously 25 through 21 has been decided. And I mean, at this point, anything that would have made the list has been cut. So I think the 25 items are not up for debate. However, if you want to hash out the order of some stuff hereafter, I'm more than welcome. You're welcome to do that. But I feel like for podcast content, it works better if I just decide the list and then you vehemently disagree with me on some of these. I think that's better than collaboration. Personally.
Okay. As I was prepping for this, I realized, and then I didn't want to mess. This is your baby. I didn't want to mess with the structure of it, but I realized it will be hard for me to complain in real time because I don't know what else is on the list and where we're going with this thing. So it's not like I can say, how could you have that number 23? Because 23 might be perfect. I don't know what else is on this list.
Correct.
I don't know anything about what we're doing over these 5 episodes. All right. But it's the top 25 college basketball stories of the past 25 years, according to Matt Norlander, with random thoughts from Gary Parrish. That's how we're going to describe this thing. We will drop these episodes in regularly, but not necessarily weekly. Yeah. We'll get them to you when we get them to you. We'll never make you wait too terribly long, and hopefully it'll be fun. I'm having fun already. I hope you're having fun.
I'm having fun. And yes, listen, inevitably, like you do something like this, it's going to cost. I'm ready for it. Whatever, bring it on. Before we even get to number 25, I'm going to give you some of the last cuts here. And man, there's been a whole hell of a lot that's happened in the past 25 years. And this is just men's college basketball, but I will put this out in front right away. I think it is unavoidable that there's going to be, I think I put in under consideration every story that should have been reasonably examined to be on the top 25 list. And my cuts, I've got like almost 10 here that didn't make the cut, but I think there's going to be 1 or 2 that I don't mention either on this episode. I'll have a few other goodies for you on our next one. That's 20 to 16. So I'm aware of that. And I want to hear from you on all this stuff. So feel free to find us. Social media, you can find the podcast, Eye on CBB, podcast on Twitter, all that good stuff. With that in mind, here, let's go with some honorable mention stuff, okay? I am starting, and I want to say this up front, I'm starting with the 2000-2001 season, okay? So with that in mind, I think there was one story, and this, frankly, this was a way to get one more story on the list, and then I can just mention this one. It doesn't have to technically be on the list, but I think what I'm about to mention quite clearly would be on the list if you went strictly since January 1, 2000 would have been but for season purposes, I started with the October, November of 2000 and then moved it on. Bob Knight was fired in September of 2000. Bob Knight being fired from Indiana, I think objectively is one of the 25 biggest stories in men's college basketball since we flipped the calendar, but it did happen before they started practicing that season and all that. And the events which led to his firing actually happened months before that. So before I reel off all the other honorable mentions, GP, I did want to at least address that one first, because I think considering his standing where college basketball was then and there, you could make the case that Bob Knight getting fired from Indiana would be somewhere in the top 15.
It would be definitely on the list, which means right off the bat, we're operating with a flawed list. It's a flawed list right from the jump.
Thanks, man.
Congratulations for putting together a flawed list right from the jump. In all seriousness, let me start by saying I don't care, but let me add, I do think Bob Knight's firing should be a part of the conversation we're having.
Okay, then we'll make it a top 25 and 1.
Okay, good.
And 1 for your purposes. There we go.
Okay, perfect. Now we're good.
Huge deal. Now, a lot of the stuff that led to it was, Bob, go back and read up on it. The information is not hard to find, but a lot of that was end of the last century. Then, he gets put on double secret probation, not so secret, zero tolerance policy. And then inevitably he was believed to have violated it multiple times. And then just a random student says, "Hey, Knight, what's up?" Knight puts his hands on the student. That happens, I think, in June of 2000. He eventually gets fired. There are protests on campus. I mean, this leads the national news. It was a very, very big story.
Yeah. And it was evidence. I don't guess we needed more evidence, but just evidence that Bob Knight quite literally could not help himself. Because they did everything they could to keep him. Nobody ever wanted to fire Bob Knight. And it was like, yo, man, please just stop. Mm-hmm. And he could not help himself. And on some level, unfortunately and sadly, that's the story of a big part of his life. He could not get out of his own way. In addition to being a brilliant basketball coach, he made his life more complicated than it needed to be, and his legacy more complicated than it needed to be.
Without a doubt. So, for unofficial purposes, this is a top 25 and 1. The thumbnails are not changing though. So
okay, fine.
Top 25, and so that was my toughest decision. Do I want to include? There were so many stories, and I said, you know what? I'll just start with the 2000-2001 season and move it all along. But if you want to include it unofficially, when this article eventually publishes, maybe we make it a top 25 and 1, and that gets put on the list as well. Other close cuts. My last cut was what just happened this past season. The SEC completes maybe inarguably the greatest single season in the history of men's college basketball, gets 14 bids to the NCAA tournament, as a member of its conference win the national championship, has a record-setting 7 teams into the Sweet 16, all that stuff. So that was an honor. I'll just run down them all and you tell me what you think. These are not on the list. These were the final cuts. Kevin Durant in general. Now, the thing that was the second cut. Kevin Durant was unlike any freshman we had ever seen before in college basketball. He won Freshman of the Year, National Player of the Year. That had never happened until Durant got to college. The thing that frankly held it back was Texas, for all of Durant's brilliance, Texas with a 4 seed didn't even make the Sweet 16, and he didn't have a chance to extend his story deep into March, which muted it just a little bit, but he was the close second cut. And then these other ones are any order you want to pick. John Calipari leaves Kentucky for Arkansas, was under consideration. The first Rick Pitino sex scandal in 2009 with the extortion attempt, that was under consideration. The Bernie Fine scandal at Syracuse that was a big time story for a short period of time. That was under consideration to make the list. Zach Edey winning back-to-back National Player of the Year, being the first player to do that in more than 4 decades, and then getting Purdue to the title game as an attachment to that was also under consideration, just missed the list. And then 2 more. Chris Beard being arrested and eventually fired from Texas. And then one more that it wasn't under real consideration to make the list, like it wasn't for second or third cut, but it was a deserved out and out scandal when it happened. And as I thought more about building this list, Parrish, I thought, what if this happened in 2022 or 2025? Larry Eustace at Iowa State drinking at a frat party at the University of Missouri, oh, by the way, and everything that attached to that, and him losing his job with all of that. That was just a wild. I mean, college athletics has provided some just insanely wild stories over the years. That was a big one as well. So those were the closest cuts. And I do want to say the list that I have compiled is not just how big the stories were in real time when they happened. With some of these, it's also how long was the tail? What impact did it have in the years to come, if at any? But I wanted to both look at it, how much it meant in real time when it happened, however recent or not. Some of these go back to the early 2000s. And, okay, how much does the story mean all these years later in 2025? So of the ones that didn't make the list, which one do you think was the best case to be the biggest story?
You know what? listening to, I do know numbers 25, 24, 23, 22, and 21. And as I'm comparing the honorable mention that you just mentioned to those, honestly, it's not obvious to me that you got to have one of them and take one of these out. Edie winning back-to-back National Players of the Year, that's a big story, but it doesn't seem crazy to omit it.
It was on my first draft. It was number 25 on the first draft that I assembled. Yeah.
KD's freshman season was just, it popped, and we realized pretty quickly we were watching something unusual here, but it didn't have the March success that we typically attach to college basketball legendary stories. And so I can understand leaving that off, but man, if you lived through it, woo. Yes. I mean, he was a monster. And then Michael Beasley came in the next year and like broke a lot of his Big 12 records. Right. Beasley just did it differently. So it wasn't as like, Beasley was just all around the rim, not all around the rim, but it was just like rebounds and points, and just like you look up and he's got 34 and 15 type stuff. And where KD was just at his size doing things from all over the court that you just don't see college players do, or at least you certainly didn't see them at that time. So that was amazing, but it's not, it doesn't feel like an obvious mistake to leave that, any of those, that or any of the other ones off of the list. So far, I got no real complaints.
Those are the closest. I have more.
Okay.
Here are the other ones that were just under consideration, but weren't as close. Cooper Flagg as a story. In January we talked about like he hasn't quite popped yet. And overall, big picture, we did also, if you haven't listened to this, go back and find it. We did a pod. I did the top 25 biggest stars in college basketball back. It's 2025, folks. Like, this is the only year we're going to have the opportunity to do this. Cooper Flagg, I think, was rightfully under consideration, didn't make the list. 4 1 seeds in 2008. Frankly, 4 1 seeds making it finally in 2025 reduced that impact just a little bit. The only time it ever happened, obviously, and that was a pretty big Final Four. Bruce Pearl being fired at Tennessee for lying to the NCAA about having a barbecue with Aaron Kraft. Kelvin Sampson resigned/fired at Indiana after violating rules. Got a 5-year show cause. Is coming off of some of the stuff at Oklahoma. One that will not be on the list that you might be expecting: conference realignment kills the Pac-12 and leads to a Power 5 in college basketball. There will be conference realignment stuff on this episode, but that one I decided to omit from the list. Coach K passing Bob Knight's all-time win record was a pretty big damn deal at the time when it happened, 14 years ago. I considered that. St. Joe's undefeated regular season. Jimmermania at BYU. Grayson Allen tripping people. Rick Pitino makes St. John's relevant for the first time in 25 years was a pretty big story, but it didn't make the list. Scandals along the lines of guys losing their jobs. Greg Marshall. Remember the Mike Rice stuff as it happened when the Final Four was going on at Rutgers? Those were notable. Games on aircraft carriers. Shabazz Napier says players are going hungry at the 2014 Final Four. That makes national news when he does that. And then just one that is not on the list and wasn't really under consideration. But, oh, by the way, in 2018, the NCAA finally killed the RPI after years of people lobbying for it to do it, swapped it for the net. That has, significant impact on the sport every year since. So those were the other ones that I looked into, but none of ones that we've talked about so far are going to be on this list.
Yeah, I'm okay with every one of those being left off of the list based on nothing more than what I've seen at 25, 24, 23, 22, and 21. It's debatable, obviously, but I don't think it's crazy to leave any of them off.
Before we get to the list, what's the most, of everything I have mentioned, in retrospect, what's the most, surreal of all of them? Because to me, and part of this was just having to write about it so much. Frankly, we podcasted about it a ton. Like the Grayson Allen stuff throughout his Duke, it wasn't 1 or 2 incidents. Like there were probably about 5 times in his career. I'm not saying there were 5 tripping incidents. There were 5 incidents in games where it just became a thing where, is something going to happen? It did happen. Okay, now we need 3 stories on this in the next 2 hours. Like that kind of stuff. It just, that one, and there's a lot of surreal stuff, like the Rick Pitino stuff, just all-timer. But the Grayson Allen stuff I would define as maybe the most surreal of any of the ones I listed.
I mean, the Pitino stuff was just so messy and so ugly, and everybody had jokes for it, and I guess I made them as well. But I remember having a moment where I was like, "Man, this isn't fun." Like,
yeah,
this is a wrecked family, and I knew Richard well, and I was like, I was friendly with Richard. Like, we'd have lunch together and stuff, and then I just realized, like, what if he's turning, like he hops on Twitter and there I am just, popping off jokes about his dad. Not to mention, like, I've known Rick for a long time and I like Rick a lot as well. And I had a moment where that stopped being funny. I know everybody still made jokes, but I was like, this is a man.
Yeah. I don't know if any coaches, a basketball coach, been on the receiving end of more jokes than Pitino, just generally speaking, GP.
Yeah, I remember, and maybe this is just with growing older or some level of maturity. I don't know. I don't need an award for it. I just remember making a decision to stop joking about that because what it really was a bunch of people's lives getting flipped in a bad situation, just bad, uncomfortable, awkward stuff played out in a very public way. People all over America have marriage problems and issues and whatever, and it usually happens, outside of newspaper headlines. Mm-hmm. And this was an embarrassing situation that played out very publicly. And I know I made jokes, but I remember subsequently going, "This is not that funny," and I'm not going to scold people for getting their jokes off, but I'm going to stop participating in that. So that was obviously surreal. The Larry Eustachy stuff, I'd frankly forgotten about it.
It's part of why I want to do this for our audience as well. Like, because we have a decent portion of our audience is like 25 and younger. And so some of you watching or listening have no idea. Like, the Eustachy story is, again, there's also a real level of like concern and sadness to it. But also just wild. Like, truly, like, college coaches a game, and that night is chugging beers at a frat party in Missouri. And it wasn't just that, but that was the primary event, Sheepy. And yes, the fact that you say, like, I had forgotten about it, kind of like why I want to do this. Like, when I was even doing this, I was like, man, the Bernie Fine stuff, like I'd half forgotten about it. But I went to Syracuse specifically to go watch a Syracuse game. And then Andy Katz and I, as the national media members that were, I think, primarily, like, it was on us to kind of, go after Boeheim and that whole thing, So anyway, to your point, yeah, some of this stuff is just to kind of jog the memory and think about just how many wild things have happened in the sport in the past 25 years.
And yeah, that way, and the Eustachy stuff would play out. What year was it again? What year was Eustachy?
I want to say Eustachy was 2007, but I'm going to check right now.
I think it feels earlier than that.
So maybe like 04?
It feels early because I didn't know Larry when this happened.
Do you think you were at CBS? 2003.
No, that's right.
2003.
That's the way I remember it, because I didn't know Larry when this incident happened, but he subsequently got the Southern Miss job. Yes. Was it the Southern Miss job?
Yeah, I think yes. And then he went to Colorado State, I believe that was.
Yeah, okay, so I was the Memphis beat writer, and I guess the Conference USA, and he was in the same league, and I got to know him as the Memphis beat writer because he was in the league, and found him to be funny, and like I like Larry. Like, I haven't talked to Larry in years, but when I was around him and had conversations with him, I really liked him, and that story is just bananas. I mean, just like imagine that playing out in this world of social media.
Oh my, yeah.
I mean, it probably would never happen, or I don't want to say never say never, but it probably wouldn't happen in 2025 because the coach would be like, I cannot be in this situation with all these iPhones pointed at me, right? But back then you weren't really at risk of somebody pointing a phone at you and taking a picture, and so it was just. Although if I remember correctly, there were pictures from that night.
Correct. Yes. Des Moines Register ran the photos to accompany a story that appeared. I'm going to read real quick. This is an AP story from 2003. Iowa State basketball coach Larry Eustachy said drinking was a factor in his behavior at a student party in Missouri, where he was photographed holding a beer and kissing female students on the cheek. The story continues further down. Eustachy was photographed at a party in Columbia, Missouri apartment during the early morning hours of January 22nd after the Cyclones lost to Missouri. And there's just more from there, but yes, just a wild story, and would have been even wilder had it happened in this age of media. Yeah. And credit to you, and keep going, but Eustachy like atoned for it. Like, he, as you said, like, you didn't know him then, but you've known it. Like, obviously an event in his life that he doesn't want to be primarily remembered for, and was thankfully and fortunately able to adjust his life, and he got head coaching jobs again and was able to continue on, and this didn't, ruin his career.
All right, let's get to the list. I feel like you've put it off long enough.
I have. Well, but before we get to we're 19 minutes. I knew this was going to happen. This was a long honorable mention, but I had to mention the stories that weren't going to be on the list. Okay. Nada, you know what though? I think it's partners time. We're going to take a break, go to our partners, and then we'll get to number 25 on the list. Let's go.
Victory here in Shanghai. You want, baby?
All right, it's the top 25 college basketball stories of the past 25 years, with the exception of the time Bob Knight was fired at Indiana. Let's
Put it
go.
on the list.
Let's go.
Okay, the first one. This goes back to the early 2000s. I think this has to be on the list. You can make a case it should be higher, as you can with many of these stories. Conference realignment, the first earthquake. Miami and Virginia Tech bail on the Big East for the ACC in 2004, and then Boston College follows the next year. That's when they officially did it. They obviously voted to do it in the year before that. Those moves ultimately laid the groundwork that would induce widespread conference realignment years later, obviously with everything that happened in 2010, 2012, 2013, and then even further on down the road. This is why I didn't have the Pac-12 dissolving, even though that was a huge story in and of itself. And to be clear, realignment has always been a thing that has happened with regularity in college sports for basically almost 100 years. One move ripples to another, which affects another. It's like continental drift. But this one is particularly significant because it was Miami and Virginia Tech, and this was done for let me be clear. It was done for football reasons, but the effect on the Big East, one of the proudest basketball conferences, quite clear. I've got a story here, GP, from the New York Times on June 30th, 2003, when Miami and Virginia Tech left. It reads, the addition of Miami and Virginia Tech could transform the ACC, best known for its top programs in basketball, into a football powerhouse, end quote. Well, that didn't quite happen. The Big East, if you've forgotten, tried to sue to block the action. That failed. Then Commissioner Mike Tranghese, who's considered one of the better commissioners in the history of college athletics, he said at the time, quote, we've been through this for 2 months, and I think those of us that are involved have had enough of it. I think the public is disgusted with all of us, to be honest with you. We're educational groups, and we're held to a higher standard than most people. And I think people have looked at us in a not very good way, and that includes me, end quote. AP had a story on how about this? This is kind of forgotten a little bit after the fact, but initially the ACC wanted to bring in Miami, Syracuse, and Boston College, and then Virginia Tech was pressured to allow, or the University of Virginia was pressured to allow Virginia Tech to come aboard. So the intentional order was not the eventual order. Boston College actually voted against Miami and Virginia Tech initially, and then, oh, by the way, October of 2003, so like 3.5 months later, Boston College follows suit. It does so to get the ACC to 12 teams, which it needed to get to in order to have a conference football championship game. That was the threshold. Then not every league was having a championship game back in 2003. And in the years that followed, GP, BC leaves. Then the Big East mutilates Conference USA by bringing on Cincinnati, DePaul, Louisville, Marquette, South Florida. That turns the Big East into a 16-team league for a little bit, the largest in history at that point. That helps the Big East set a record that was only broken this year by getting 11 bids in 2011. Just very, very big decisions that no one could have possibly predicted would be omens for what was coming with the Big Ten and the SEC and all the splintering that would happen effectively less than a decade later, and then into the late 2010s. BC's been worse because of it. I think it's the biggest loser of any power conference team that has ever switched high major to high major in the past 25 years. I don't think it's close. They don't have anything to show for it in football and men's or women's basketball for the most part. Meantime, Miami and Virginia Tech have had huge down periods. Miami has not won an ACC championship in football since it switched. That's incredible. Virginia Tech has 4, but they all came in the ensuing 4 or 5 seasons afterward. Your thoughts on what happened here, number 25 on the list?
Because of my age, I guess, I have most of these stories I'm going to have lived through in my career and covered a lot of them. And this one is one of those. Again, I was Memphis beat writer at the Commercial Appeal and actually got sent to Florida, Big East spring meetings while all of this was going on, to do on the ground reporting about the possibility of Memphis maybe receiving a Big East invitation, because that was at least speculated about at the time. It didn't happen then. Ultimately, Memphis did get a Big East invitation. Memphis was technically a member of the Big East. for a minute. And then it split, and the basketball-only schools wanted to do their own thing. And
wasn't Boise State in the Big East for a minute? I think all this happened.
Yeah, there was a time where you could walk in the Memphis basketball facility, and the Big East logo was in there, but they never actually played in the Big East. So I was down there in Florida while watching the Big East take this hit, and I remember it. Now we're so used to conference realignment that it's just like, well, of course people are moving around. But that first one was like, whoa, what is happening? And I was just scrolling through earlier, like looking at league standings, just at the power conferences.
Yeah.
Basically everybody has changed leagues in the past 25 years. That's an exaggeration. But like, here's a list. I'm sure I'm missing a lot. But here's a list: Louisville, SMU, Stanford, Syracuse, Cal, Boston College, Miami, Virginia Tech, Houston, BYU, Arizona, West Virginia, TCU, Utah, Cincinnati, UCF, Arizona State, Colorado, Creighton, UConn, Butler, Maryland, UCLA, Oregon, Rutgers, USC, Nebraska, Washington, Texas A&M, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, and that's just at the power conference level.
Man. And although there was movement, like, the Big 8 going to the Big 12 in the 90s, like that also affected as well. This what happened here early 2003 really did, as I said before, like it set the groundwork, because there were moves explicitly made because of football and what more money could await with that. And a lot of that stuff wasn't realized to a larger extent and a more fracturing extent until, 2011, 2012, 2013. But yeah, man, I think this is the one story I have on the entire top 25, I think, that has the most impact that doesn't quite get its recognition. And some of that maybe it's the passage of time. We're almost going back a full 25 years at this point. But Miami and Virginia Tech, and then Boston College its train was, couple hours behind, so to speak. Those decisions to do that it leads to the Big East not even having football, and it leads to the splinter of the Catholic Seven and all that kind of stuff. We'll get to that later on the list on a different show. But yeah, that was a biggie. You want to go to number 24?
I can't wait.
Okay, now number 24. While you can make the case for plenty of notable retirements, I wasn't going to have multiple retirements on a list like this. I picked the one that, to me, is the most shocking. April 20th, 2022, Jay Wright retires, and he does so at 60 years old after 21 years at Villanova. He made 4 Final Fours, had just taken Villanova to the Final Four earlier that month, brought Nova to the tournament in 16 of his final 17 seasons, won 642 games, obviously a Hall of Fame coach at the time of his retirement, a 2-time Naismith Coach of the Year, 6-time Big East Coach of the Year. His was the most shocking. Tony Bennett was also pretty surprising, but Wright preceded it. And so I'd never say never, but it is hard for me to foresee a basketball coach retiring at a moment that comes with more shock than the way Jay Wright did. Now, Jay Wright came after Coach K retired. Like he had the announcement, and that was big news, but he was getting older. Roy Williams retiring on April Fool's Day in 2021. Also a very, very big deal. We were covering the tournament in the bubble when that happened, GP. And for about 7 minutes, everyone was like, is this an April Fool's Day joke? Like that was a big one as well. But Roy Williams had some health problems and was getting up there. Jay Wright was 60. And Boeheim, big deal. I mean, he had been there forever, but he was in his 70s there. Bob Knight retiring, also a very, very big deal, but there was a denouement in his career. To me, no retirement carried larger shock value than Jay Wright, because it also represented the era that we were fully in with NIL and the transfer portal, and how I think this retirement just represents on a symbolic level more of where we are and how coaches will handle their careers and getting out early. And there won't be many guys, if they're capable of coaching past 70, I just think that's going to become more and more rare. Pitino, obviously an exception to the rule. Your thoughts on number 24?
It shouldn't be surprising anytime a multimillionaire who is 60 retires, right? I mean, they like, why not?
Yeah, broadly speaking, yeah.
Broadly speaking. But Jay was in a profession where men were routinely, at the time, coaching into their 70s. And he just checked none of the normal boxes for it might be time to hang it up. Yeah, he was 60, but like I was going to say, I don't think I'll look that good at 60, but I don't look that good at 48. All right. I didn't look that good at 38. I have never looked as good as Jay Wright. All right. And I mean 60 plus Jay Wright. I would have traded my physical appearance for 60-year-old Jay Wright at any point in my life. All right. Okay.
Even at 7.
Even at 7, I would have just been like, take my 7-year-old body and make me 60-year-old Jay Wright, please. All right. What I mean is he feels like, I'm not at his doctor visits, but he comes across like a young 60. He was obviously still at the tip top of the sport, always making the NCAA tournament, always having top 25 teams, always advancing more often than not. He'd won multiple national championships. He was just in the Final Four. And we don't have to relive it. Jay's told the story a million times, but just decided it's time to do something else, or at least not this. And so, yeah, it was shocking. Of the past 25 years, and I don't mean to screw up your list, but I don't know if this is on it, but the only coaching decision that would surprise me more, it wasn't a retirement.
I know what you're going to say.
Brad Stevens to the Celtics.
Right. Yeah.
That was shocking.
Mm-hmm.
Is that on the list?
I'm not going to spoiler the list. Okay. But obviously that was Brad Stevens going to the Celtics was more shocking than Jay Wright retiring. That's for sure. Yes. That was a more shocking development there. By the way, when Wright was so this is Nada's got a quick 8-second clip here that he's going to play. In fact, just play it right now, Nada, and then we'll talk about it real quick before going to number 23.
Let's go down front to Hoops.
Jay, how are you?
Hoops is in the house. Get to say it one last
David
time.
McCormick tonight.
All right. Replay that on your pod or on your YouTube as you watch Jay Wright. So that's Hoops Weiss, who has covered college basketball forever. Legend. In the industry. Legend. Love Hoops. And whenever Hoops wanted to ask Jay a question, no matter the venue, Jay Wright, I don't know when it started, but he did it for years and years and years. Hoops is in the house. And on that clip, this is after Villanova loses in the Final Four. He says, Hoops is in the house. I get to say it one last time. This is 2.5, 3 weeks before Jay Wright actually publicly it's known he's retiring. And whether he did it consciously or subconsciously, like he did tip us. Just a wild Easter egg after the fact that he said that. He might have meant it in the there and then, like, okay, our season's over. But I think on some subconscious level, he was aware of it. And in fact, last thing for me on this, I think it was Dana O'Neill. It wasn't after the loss. It was media availability on that Thursday or Friday before the national semi. She had asked him, I think, about Roy Williams having retired and Krzyzewski, because I've talked to Jay about this since. Maybe paraphrase a question that wasn't it whatsoever, but she basically was like, when you see all these coaches and you think about your end, like what comes to mind? I remember Jay telling me after the fact, he thought he was found because no one knew. Like it was him and his wife, and I think his AD and his president. I think there were, at the time the Final Four game happened, I think those were the only 4 people that truly knew that he was going to retire at that point. And so he gets this question. He's on the dais. And he's just thinking like, who found out? Who leaked this? Who knows? Like, is this going to come out before I got to coach in this game? So he was all like nervous and flushed. Turns out it was just an innocent question. Didn't know. But it is interesting after the fact to see that that he let that, and no one even. And why would you? But no one caught on to it in real time as that happened.
But in looking back on it, it is a thing that happened that, sort of, what are these movies where they give you the whole thing at the end, and if you go back and rewatch it, you can sort of see it coming. Sixth Sense,
like a stinger or something, or I don't know.
Sixth Sense is like that, I guess. The Usual Suspects is like that, I guess. You wouldn't have picked up on that Jay Wright moment in the moment, but with the benefit of hindsight, knowing what was coming or knowing what came next, you can look back at it and go, "Oh man, that was clearly in his head somewhere." I say I was shocked by the decision. It doesn't mean I don't understand it. Like on a very basic level, if you ever in life get to a point where you're not enjoying getting up and going to work every day the way you've enjoyed it previously, and you don't need the money that comes with the job, you should walk away. You absolutely should. Mm-hmm. This is what Jay did on a very basic level. That's what Jay did. I don't enjoy doing this job and what it requires from me anymore. I have enough money that I don't need to do this job anymore. I'm not going to do this job anymore. That's Jay's that's where Jay got. That's where Woj got, and in that sense, it makes total sense to me. It is interesting we're talking about this today.
I know.
Because his name's back in the news.
I was going to bring it up if you didn't, and I guess like old takes exposed me. There is no chance Jay Wright coaches the Knicks, like as we do. So if anyone is getting to this 2 years later, there's a cool podcast on the biggest stories. Let me go find this. It's June 3rd, 2025 at 4:00 in the afternoon. I actually even went back and read my Jay Wright newser when he retired. And I do remember having conversations with he's not coaching he's not going to coach the Knicks. We are so thankful and appreciative to have him as a lead analyst at CBS Sports and on the tournament with Turner and all that and WBD and all that good stuff. He doesn't need it. And he's not going to go. I know his name is going to get invoked. It's amazing we could do this one more time. And we'll get to Dan Hurley at some point before this series is over. And now we got the Dan Hurley stuff out there and all that because we're a year removed from the Lakers and all that. So the timing is amazing that we are doing this pod episode, GP, all of an hour removed from the news breaking that Tom Thibodeau has been fired by the Knicks after getting him to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years. The NBA is wild.
Old Takes Exposed. Make sure if we ever get to this point, it is Norlander who said there's, quote, no chance.
No chance. Jay Wright's not going to coach the Knicks. No chance. And when I prove to be right, then what do I get? Nothing?
No, you get nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
This only matters if you're wrong. Okay? This only matters if you're wrong. Unless you want to, in all seriousness, sources have told CBS Sports Jay Wright has no interest in the New York Knicks opening. Knock it out, Norlander, if you want to do it.
In real time.
Since you've already
invented and tweeted. Yeah,
since you've already made career choices for Jay Wright, go ahead and get it out there. Come on.
I will say this. I mean, and Jay Wright has also said it publicly. He has publicly stated plenty of times before he has no desire to coach at the NBA level. So I'm going off of that. Could it have changed? Did he wake up this morning and say, you know what? Maybe I give up this incredible gig I have talking on television to go into the grind of coaching an NBA team for 90 plus games a season.
Everything you're saying is true. I would just stop short of no chance, because at some point, what happens if somebody says, here's 5 years, $75 million to coach guys you've won national championships with and live in New York City and let's go. Like that, I don't care how happy you are. You got to at least think about that. And at least think, and you might think about it for 2 seconds and say, no way, I don't want any part of that. But I think you got to think about it, don't you?
Sure. I mean, if someone offers you that much money, yeah, sure. Of course, you need to think about it. The Dan Hurley piece seems slightly more realistic. But who the hell knows? With the way this stuff works, the Knicks management might have their guy in mind, and being a sitting head coach in the NBA might even be the leader in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I would just stop short of no chance, because man, you can think you don't want to do something, and then somebody says, here it is. This is what it involves. You want to coach all these young men that you have great experiences with, and make $1 bazillion, and maybe if you can hang that banner, become the king of New York City. I would just stop short of no chance, because even if
that's not how you make the podcast magic happen, you know that.
Even if I thought I didn't want to do it, if somebody put that in front of me, I'd be like, let me think. Let me look at this. The flip side of it is interesting as well. Can you imagine a Final Four coach getting fired?
I know.
Like Kevin Keats was getting fired.
Stop short of it, because it's not like he did get fired a year later, but let's just say Elite Eight, because but I know what you're saying. But even in a coach that makes the Elite Eight and gets fired, have we ever even seen that same year? I doubt it. A guy makes the Elite Eight and gets fired. Now, maybe when the tournament was 15, 16 teams large, maybe it happened back then. But in the past 50 years, I severely doubt it.
Think about these two things. Kevin Keats was getting fired and only didn't get fired because he made the Final Four.
Yeah.
Okay. Tom Thibodeau made the Final Four and has done all this other stuff that nobody's done in New York in a quarter century type stuff, and gone. And I'm not even saying it's a wrong decision. I'm just saying that's how different the professions are. In the NBA, they will get anybody at any time, and college just really isn't quite like that.
Yeah, no, it's wild, but it's the NBA, so I guess nothing is too shocking, surprising. Let's move to number 23. This is April of 2010. After the NCAA flirts for months publicly with expanding to 96 teams, it receives severe pushback and ultimately decides to go from 65 to 68. I'm going to read you the AP story from April 1 of 2010. This is April 1. They have not decided to go to 68 at this point. Here's a quick bit of it. The NCAA appears to be on the verge of expanding the men's basketball tournament to 96 teams. Insisting that nothing has been decided, NCAA Vice President Greg Shaheen nonetheless outlined a detailed plan Thursday that included the logistics and timing of a 96-team tournament, how much time off the players would have, and even revenue distribution. Shaheen said the NCAA looked at keeping the current 65-team model and expanding to 68 or 80 teams, but decided the bigger bracket was the bet fit logistically and financially. It will be played during the same time frame as the current 3-week tournament and include first-round buys for 32 teams. Although the plan still needs to be approved by the D1 Men's Basketball Committee and passed on to the board of directors, most of the details already seem to be in place. The 96-team tournament would likely envelop the 32-team NIT, though Shaheen said no decision has been made. The new format with yada yada. So anyway, this is April 1, right around the Final Four in 2010. So go back. This is the Final Four that includes Butler losing to Duke in the title game. Stick around. That'll be on a future episode. All good stuff. Mild spoilers, obviously. They ultimately, though, in a span of 2 weeks, decide instead to merely go from 65 to 68. Now, you at the time were at CBS. I remember reading your coverage about this. I was hired at CBS later that year in 2010, so I wasn't on board just yet. But I was writing for Yahoo. I had my own independent site, College Hoops Journal, stringing for Fox Sports. I remember following this intensely. I remember wanting to get on the conference call about this and not being able to get the code to do so. And I do remember the backlash being like extremely wide, like pretty much to the level that it is now. And it's interesting that we're talking about this now because Charlie Baker just a few days ago came out and said, we're still trying to get to 72 or 76, and we'll see if that can happen and decisions on that, yada, yada. But to me, this is number 23. It was a very, very big deal at the time. Obviously, there was a connective thread to where we are and where we have been, frankly, over the past 3-4 years with expansion talk there. What do you remember about it at the time, and thoughts on 65 to 68 in 2010?
I don't remember much about it at the time.
Really?
I believe I have always been against expansion. I believe that's true. Like
Yeah.
I do, in the sense that if you ask my opinion on it, I will say it's unnecessary. And I still hold that opinion. It is unnecessary. I never believed we needed to go from 64 to 68. I do not believe we need to go from 68 to 72 or any other number. If it were strictly up to me and nothing else mattered, including television inventory, revenue, I'm just, what's the best product I can present?
Yep.
I would have a 64-team tournament. It fits so perfectly on one sheet of paper. Let's fill out the brackets like we did when we were, kids.
Sing, buddy, sing.
Okay. So that is my opinion. You don't need to ask me to get on board with your anti-expansion campaign. I'm already on board. I don't want it either. That said, this is where I split with people. It feels inevitable. So what are we yelling about? It's like waking up every day and saying, I never want to die. Well, you are eventually. All right. So I don't maybe skip that part of your day every day.
People say it feels inevitable, and it might happen. I'm just telling you, I have consistently heard from sources at the NCAA level who have insisted. Some of this is on the record, by the way. Dan Gavin on this damn podcast, who say that it is not indeed inevitable because they don't have the money to break even. And so if they expand, then these conferences will have to agree to pay less money to their teams by making the tournament. That's why it keeps getting. I'm not saying it won't happen. If you made me pick, I'll pick that they do it. I wish they wouldn't, but people continuously, GP, come back to me and say, hey, listen, if this happens, barring some panacea where you have sponsorships that are going to cover all of these costs, like the schools and the presidents and the athletic directors are going to have to agree to take less money by winning in the NCAA tournament if we do this. And so that is why people push back on it being inevitable. Continue.
If you live to be 70, you will not die in a year with a 68-team NCAA tournament. That's what I'm telling you. That's
Okay.
what I mean by inevitable. It will eventually increase. Maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. We will. My grandkids, if I ever have them, will not watch a 68-team men's basketball tournament. So I don't like that. I would go back to 64 before I go up to 72.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel like we can keep screaming about it. It's not going to matter. Eventually, it'll get to that point. Where I split with the anti-expansion crowd is I don't think it's going to kill anything. And I don't think it's going to ruin anything. And what I base that opinion on is that postseason expansion what has it killed? Did it kill Major League Baseball?
I wouldn't say it kills. I think it can degrade. I think there's a difference.
But people like to use words like kill and ruin. It's going to kill the sport, kill the regular season, ruin college basketball. Big words. I don't think any of that's true. And if you do, tell me why. Did playoff expansion kill the NFL, ruin the regular season? Buddy, have you seen the television numbers on it?
Yeah, well, I hear you. The NFL is the one exception to every rule because it doesn't apply.
Okay, let's do NBA playoffs. Has it killed anything? The expansion of it?
No, but you're also,
let's do Major League Baseball playoffs. Let's do the World Cup.
I think you'll find baseball people that say that the playoff model now is not a superior product to the sport versus what was there 20 years ago. I'm not saying I say that. I think you can find people that definitely are not as on board as
Do you know how many times I am able to watch meaningful baseball games deep into the calendar because of the presence of wild cards? That if there were no wild cards, the Mets season would be over in July or June.
How are the Mets doing right now, by the way?
Let's just beat the Dodgers late last night in extra innings.
There we go. Playoff started today with the Mets being?
Yes. What are you talking about?
I'm just checking.
They're
Cubs are doing just fine. I'm not concerned.
They're number 2 in the CBS
Mets in June. Okay.
They're number 2 in Matt Snyder's CBS Sports MLB Power Rankings.
And you need to tweet at him and call him a penis if they're not number 1. And just
it is funny because I go to his Power Rankings and I look at him and I go, "Oh, that's nice. Tigers 1, Mets 2. I like this." But if the Mets would have been 9th, it would have never even occurred to me to tweet him. I am attacked about rankings every day of my life, and yet I also look at other people's rankings and I don't even. It stirs no emotion in me. I don't feel like I just got a tweet from somebody earlier, and it's like, Bill Parrish has got Kentucky outside of the top 10 again, just like always. I'm like, what are you talking about? Just like always. What does that even mean? Or some guy's like, as much as you hate it, you're going to have to get NC State in there at some point. I'm like, as much as I hate it? What are you talking about? You weirdos. I mean, I am appreciative that there are people out there who get angry about college basketball rankings.
Yes.
Like I need those people, right?
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
But just psychos. But just know this, buddy, I think you're insane. If you are fired up in early June about college basketball rankings, I think you're a crazy person, but I appreciate you. But I think you're bananas. Here's what I'm trying to tell you. I believe expansion will happen. I do not want it. I do not think it'll ruin or kill anything because the history of sports, playoff expansion doesn't tend to ruin or kill anything. It's just something that happens and we adjust and everything is mostly fine. I do not have the big concerns other people have.
You really don't remember much about covering it back in 2010 though?
No.
Wow. I definitely this was you covering this. I read your stuff before this, but this was, and not even knowing that I would eventually wind up being your colleague, 5-6 months later. Yeah, you wrote about a lot. And that's typical. I remember more about what you did than you did. But I meet people sometimes like on a golf course or wherever, and they'll be like, "Do you remember where you really find it to be true, where people remember things? It'll be when you covered high school sports." People, because those are the things people cut out and frame and keep. Yeah. So I met a man on a golf course a couple years ago, and he was like, "My daughter was," and she was I remembered her, but she was a tennis player. And he was like, "You remember this one story?" And I said, "The best I can do is recognize her name when you say it out loud. But no, I don't remember the one story. I mean, how could I possibly?" But yeah, I tend to I do things and then I move on. I don't hold on to the memories too much, either intentionally or not. Fair enough.
This is all going to be great when I get diagnosed with what.
Okay.
It'll be like we saw it coming. The guy talked about it on the Ion College Basketball Podcast all the time.
Oh boy. Well, that was a biggie in 2010, and by the 96 is just absolutely asinine. And thankfully, because it is conceivable that the NCAA could have just plowed through. And I'm not even kidding you when I say that if the I don't think I would have pursued covering college basketball at the 96 team tournament because the regular season would truly be rendered irrelevant.
You would have chosen a different profession?
No, like we can keep this moving, but I absolutely at a certain point was like, all right, I really love the NFL and I really love college basketball. Which one do I want to cover? Well, I love them both equally, but there's a lot fewer people covering college basketball. So I can, work my way in, maybe climb up a little bit more quickly or easily because of that. And so that was a major reason why. And so I could easily see myself in 2010, they expanded 96. The regular season is irrelevant. Like I'm just going to chase doing football instead. I could have been Will Brinson's right-hand man instead. That's entirely possible.
A possible career change if they would.
That's
quite a threat.
I apologize to everyone that's had to endure and willingly has opted into this podcast for well over a decade at this point. 96 teams, and you wouldn't have seen me. You wouldn't have known me, so.
That's hilarious to me. I do get this question sometimes, and this seems like a perfectly reasonable place to answer it quickly. Sometimes I do get asked, why did you cover college basketball? Why are you a college basketball reporter? Did you play basketball? Was basketball your favorite sport? No and no. Basketball has never been my favorite sport, and it is not something that I played outside of like driveways and stuff like that when I was a child. Here's the truth. My first job was at the Commercial Appeal newspaper. I was so ambitious. I wanted the best job at that paper, period. What is the best job at this paper outside of the columnist? Covering Tiger basketball. That's what it was at the time. So that's what I wanted. I wanted the best job, and it was a college basketball job. If my first job would have been in Austin at the Austin American Statesman, I believe I would be a college football writer because I would have wanted the best job there, and that would have been covering Texas football. My career is dictated by where my first job was and what I wanted from that job.
That's true. And you've also said before on the show that you were like the 5th pick to be the CBS Sports college basketball writer back in the day.
No. That's not true. I was genuinely, when I got hired, the people who interviewed were, I want to say it was me, Mark Schlabach, Jeff Goodman, and Pete Thamel. Yeah. And I believe Pete Thamel was offered the job, and he decided to stay at the New York Times, and then the job came to me.
There we go.
That's what I believe to be true.
All right, number 22. Just a few years ago, March of 2022. St. Peter's.
Appreciate it, Pete. Appreciate it.
St. Peter's becomes the first 15 seed to make the Elite Eight. Now, we had 15 seeds win games before, obviously, Dunk City. Under consideration, that was a big deal. GP covered it in person, obviously. Oral Roberts made the Sweet 16 the year before in the bubble tournament. Since then, we've seen Princeton as a 15 seed make the Sweet 16. Lehigh beating Duke, Norfolk State over Missouri, Hampton in 01 beating Iowa State. That was a biggie. Richmond was the first 15 seed to ever win against Syracuse in 1991. I didn't even think about trivia timing you with that, GP. But Peters is the big one. You win 3 games, you make the regional final. That's one that has real significance. It took what, GP? It took almost 40 years in the expanded tournament era to get a 15 to win 3 games. We might have to wait another 30 years before we see it again. The Peacocks. Where is it? I didn't even think about it before we started the show. It also created this podcast moment in the early hours of March of 2022. Yep.
That's pretty good, man. That was pretty good. Like, I don't want to brag about myself too much. I know that never comes across well, people constantly bragging about themselves. So I don't want to do that.
I feel like you work it in almost every show, but keep it going.
But that's a pretty good Peacock impersonation. That's pretty good. I nailed that. I was proud of myself that night.
Is this a call for a baby bird? Is it hungry? Is this a mating call? What is this here? Sounds like a mating call to me.
I don't know how to distinguish between my peacock sounds. I don't know which is which.
Mating call.
The honest to God truth is I left that studio. I got into my
I remember
car service
I was as hell that night too.
And in the car service, I was on YouTube on my phone listening to peacock sounds and then practicing them in the car. I even had to explain to the driver, I believe, like, yo, man, this is going to be weird. I'm telling you up front, this is going to be weird, but I gotta practice some peacock noises. I got a podcast to do in about 15 minutes. That's a fun night.
You wouldn't remember. I invented not being able to talk on this podcast. I don't even think you'd remember it. Maybe Nada would. I couldn't talk. I'd hit the wall. I just travel cold.
I do have a recollection of that.
And so I was on that episode, and then eventually my Wi-Fi and the hotel, I just had to bail. So I think you closed that out.
I do remember that. So
yeah,
I didn't realize this until I went and started looking at it last night. Do you know that St. Peter's team eliminated from the NCAA tournament 2 National Players of the Year?
Yes, I did. I'm aware.
I had never put that together, but they
really? Yeah. And now it wasn't in the same season, but
Right.
Oscar Tshiebwe was the National Player of the Year on that 2-seed Kentucky team.
Right.
And then that Purdue team, its best player was Jaden Ivey, but Zach Edey was a sophomore on that team.
That's right. So they beat Kentucky in overtime, 85-79. Then they beat Murray State 70-60. Then Purdue 67-64, eliminated Edey there. Then they just got smacked by North Carolina in the Elite Eight. But they end up finishing 102nd at KenPom. They were only 19-11 entering the NCAA tournament. And it's really been not so great stuff since then. Combined record in the subsequent 3 years to the Elite Eight run, 45-48, average KenPom finish 269. So, but they'll always have that. They'll always have March 2022.
Well, I mean, we'll always have this.
Yeah.
And
good.
Also the rarity of it is why it makes a list like this, because we might not now. Hey, listen, particularly coming off the 2025 tournament where we were void of any Cinderellas. If you tell me we get a 15 next year that breaks on through the Elite Eight, that would be incredible.
And so the face of that, I guess, outside of Shaheen was maybe Doug Eddert.
For sure.
Okay.
And he was one of the early, he got NIL deals based off of that. And all I want to say Taco Bell. I've forgotten it after all these years, but he did take advantage. Yeah.
So then he ends up, I go down a Doug Eddert.
He went to Bryant. You don't even have to tell me. I'm aware. I remember when he transferred.
And the incident with Judah Mintz.
Oh, yeah.
He slapped Judah Mintz and then took off running from the Syracuse players. He didn't even pretend he was tough. he literally takes it's the funniest video you haven't seen in a while. Go find that video. It's the funniest video you haven't seen in a while. He just smacks him and then takes off. Then somebody else is coming after him. He's like, oh, hell. And he's running around trying to get away. It's hilarious. Shouts to the Peacocks.
Shouts to the Peacock. Shouts to Doug Eddert. We'll wrap it up here. As usual, we went longer than we thought, but I would anticipate this is also going to be wrong. I don't even know what I'm going to say in the pod, but I'm saying it anyway. We don't think most of these episodes will be an hour long. However, this one is going to hit that mark here. Number 21 on the 25 top stories in men's college basketball since the year 2000. March 2008, Stephen Curry's legend begins with Davidson's 2008 Elite Eight run. And I will also note, we actually, coincidentally enough, we wound up talking about this, I want to say back in March for whatever reason. They also had a near Final Four berth. So Davidson was a 10 seed. Started the season. This is what I didn't realize, GP. I did look this up. They started that season 4-6. Davidson did, with losses to Carolina, Duke, UCLA, NC State, among the most notable. But they won 22 in a row heading into that tournament. And I don't think you'd remember, but I definitely remember this. Davidson was a trendy pick to beat Gonzaga in the 10-7 game in the first round. It did it. They won by 6. It was a huge deal. This is probably I think this is the highest rated story that I considered. Do I put it on the list or do I don't? So everything that we've talked about in this episode at some point or another, I was like, is it on? Is it off? Everything after top 20, I knew in some capacity it had to be on the list here. But that was a huge deal then, national news. And in retrospect, it's become an even bigger story because Curry's a top 15 all-time NBA player and the greatest shooter we've ever seen. But for the folks listening to this who are like 23, 24 or younger, Curry taking Davidson and turning it into a national story. And frankly, I think it was uplifted just by Nansen, the number 1 CBS team, was on the call and they had the really good TV time and just a lot of stuff coalesced to make that such a huge deal. And so, yeah, that's number 21. What do you remember about it? And were you there in person to cover either of those sites?
No, I do remember. It's funny. As we joke about, I don't remember things that I actually covered, but I remember this. Mm-hmm. And we talked about it recently. I don't know what
I think we were talking about my top 25 stars and Curry was top 10. And I think that's what we got into.
Okay. So for people who didn't live through it, just understand before this happened, Steph Curry was not Steph Curry. He was Dale Curry's kid at Davidson.
Who couldn't get a scholarship to Virginia Tech. Like there was a whole bunch of that stuff. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, when you when he became, if you talked about him at all, and you probably didn't, but if you did, it was just like, oh yeah, Dale Curry's son. He's at Davidson. Like a Goodman Major player. That's all he was. He was not an NBA prospect at all. Like you go find every mock draft. He ain't on him anywhere at this point in his life. He's never been considered anything other than a little guy who can shoot, and dad played in the NBA. That's it. Then he goes down, he gets 40 against Gonzaga. Then he gets 30 against Georgetown, ended Roy Hibbert's college career.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this before. This is the big difference between winning one game and winning two.
Yep.
Because when you win two, you got all those days in between, before your next game, and it's just a build up. And what I remember most about this is that I was in Charlotte for a Thursday-Saturday regional final. North Carolina, Washington State, Louisville, and Tennessee were there. So it's a Thursday-Saturday regional. We had Friday night off. And I remember like a handful of us who were covering the Charlotte regional, like as you do, got together for drinks, and it was like, let's see if the kid can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And he delivered. And
beat Wisconsin by 17 in the regional semi.
And he was 11 of 22 from the field, 6-11 from three, 33 points in 37 minutes. And to me, that's the night it happened. Because you kind of weren't even paying attention to the Gonzaga game, whatever. There's so much going on. And it's like, oh, yeah, Dell's kid went for 40. Like, oh, wow. But how many people were watching that from the opening tip? I don't know. But the number is not significant relative to what was coming. But by the time they knocked off Gonzaga and Georgetown, and it's like now a Big Ten team, and it's Friday night in prime. It felt like a moment. And let's see what he does next. And oh, buddy, he did it. And I feel like that night, the Friday night of that Wisconsin game, is the night the Steph Curry thing really took off. And then they play Kansas in the Elite Eight, as you know. Jason Richards has a 3 at the buzzer to win it. If it goes in, it wins it.
Yeah. Ironically, not Curry's shot, but I'd have to rewatch the play. It's been a long time. I'd love to see what the
I believe Bill Self actually collapses on the sideline or something.
Like And then how they schemed it, and was it supposed to be Jason that took the shot or Curry? Like, I remember in real time being like, man, Curry doesn't even get the shot. Anyway. And
so Self goes to his first Final Four after being like, if we were doing those lists of best coaches tonight, he was the face of that for a minute. Final Four, national championship. I genuinely believe this with every ounce of whatever. If that shot goes in, college basketball is changed forever. Because if that shot goes in, Bill Self just didn't make a Final Four again, this time because he lost to Davidson. I think Oklahoma State job was open. That's his alma mater. I believe he would have left to go to Oklahoma State. Instead, he wins a national championship. They hire Travis Ford. And all these years later, Bill is still at Kansas. I think that would have been his last game as Kansas's coach if Richards makes that 3.
Steph Curry did not go to the NBA after this. He returned the following season, was a first-team All-American. Davidson did not make the NCAA tournament, but it really built up his legend. The following season is when Curry gets guarded by Pat Sosa's Loyola team.
Jimmy's team,
four guys guarding Curry, which it basically helps build up Curry's origin story. Yes. An absolutely idiotic coaching plan. Like Patsos, who, if any coach could really handle doing something, it's Patsos. Like, he doesn't really much care, but yes, he was openly mocked on PTI for what he did.
Right. But I don't know if I knew Jimmy then, but I got to know him later, worked with him a little bit. He's just a hilarious guy. He's just a great character. And so you're right. Steph comes back. Remember, they put him in the Jimmy V game, which was a big deal, Davidson and the Jimmy V.
Yeah.
And I was at the Garden for that game. I was there for that. But between those two things, between the 2008 Elite Eight run and the 2008-2009 season, I remember, I want to say it was LeBron James Skills Academy type thing, Akron or Cleveland. It was one, the Nike thing, and all the best high school players are there. And you had camp counselors. And they brought in most of the guys who were going to be in the next draft, probably. I just remember DeMar DeRozan being there. I want to say Tyreek Evans was there, maybe James Harden. But in between morning session and night session, the counselors would play pickup, and there were NBA scouts there. And I remember a scout, and this was still a time, because even after that Elite Eight run, they were like, well, yeah, but he's skinny and he's little. And is he really a point guard? Can he even play point guard? There were those types of questions about him. And I remember sitting in a little gym. The counselors are playing. I'm sitting with a scout who worked in a front office then and still does today. And he just said, there's nobody here better than him. And pointed, and I'm like, who? He said, Steph. He's the best one here. And I don't know why people don't think of him that way still in this moment, but he's the best one here. I just remember it was still not considered a consensus that this guy's going to be even a good NBA player. And that scout was like, that's the one. He's the one. And they'll figure it out eventually. And he is quite literally the greatest shooter that's ever lived. And I believe will go down in history as one of the greatest basketball players the planet's ever seen.
Yep, I think that's all firmed up. He scored 128 points in that 2008 tournament. That's 32 points per game. Made 23 trays. Davidson went 29-7, finished 11th at KenPom that season. Really awesome run. And yeah, part of, between that and St. Peter's, which we talked about, just, things that make the tournament so special and for these mid-major runs and all that kind of stuff. So let's not tamper with a really, really good thing. That's 25 through 21. We will continue with the list. I think we have it tentatively budgeted next week. We'll get to 20 through 16, and GP will learn on this journey just as you are for the most part. He gets a heads up before he needs to go down some rabbit holes and assemble all this kind of stuff. But it's a fun little pod project, and eventually we will have a story that corresponds with this, but don't want to spoil on the website before we tell you on the pod first. So with that being said, GP, go ahead. I think that's a show.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. To legend Terry Teagle, Huck and Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching, listening to the Ion College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. More of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So do that. We'll talk to you again real soon. Till then, take